Hello, welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 105 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 31 of A Clash of Kings, that's Catelyn 3.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter, we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide you some additional information about the characters and places in this chapter. Be particularly helpful if you're not reading along. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing all right. Just had a bit of a setback. about an hour and a half ago, Stacy discovered that the AC, the air conditioning on our second story of our house is not working. So that's unfortunate.
It is hot today.
Yes,
I played soccer football at lunchtime and it was really hot.
Yeah, yes, it's in the mid-90s. And to make matters worse, my dad and two of my younger brothers are on their way down to spend the weekend here with us. So we're going to all be sleeping on couches and floors in the first floor in the basement, I guess. So yeah, I don't know how we're going to work this one out, but they're already pot committed. They're more than halfway here. It's about a 9-hour drive from Pittsburgh, so...
And God, it's so hot as well. I mean, really, when I got in the car to drive home from work, it said it was 104 Fahrenheit. You've been sitting in the sun for a while.
Right, yeah, but yes.
Once I got going, it got down to 101.
Oh boy, yes. They were things really cooled off once the air hit it. Yeah, not great timing. So the guy we've always used, the air conditioning guy we've always used, he was kind of getting up there in years, and he seems to have retired because his number is no longer in service. So I had to go with someone that I don't know, which is not ideal when you're dealing with a service professional.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, you know.
You know, my house is crumbling around me.
What now?
Some foundational thing is leaning.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I've had 6 different people crawl under my house this week to look at it and give me quotes and things.
Oh boy. They're going to have to do it like a jack and then repair it
something
or whatever.
Something like that.
Oh boy. Home ownership has its privileges.
Yes.
I've always said that a house is like a baby that never grows up. It constantly needs care like a baby.
Yeah.
So
I got in touch with an engineering company to have a look at it, and they said, "Ooh, the age of your house, we usually don't bother."
We just let it crumble.
Just let it fall around my ears.
Oh, that's good stuff. Your house is a little too old. We're going to just put it on hospice.
We just sent you this sheet of things that might go wrong. They all have, believe me.
Oh, man. That's not what you want to hear. Your house is not that old.
Well, the good news is it's older than me, so...
Right.
Wait, is that good news or not? I suppose it's bad news for the house, good news for me.
It's significantly younger than your childhood home, is it not? By a good 100 or 2 years.
Yes, God.
That's still standing, so...
Yeah. My mum just got some repairs done to the roof for the first time, because in England they make houses to last.
Oh, really? So that roof has been on there like your whole life?
Yeah. And presumably for the 100 years leading up to my life.
Right,
as well.
yeah. Right, yeah.
It's made of slate. It doesn't degrade. It's made of slate, you know. I mean, it would take an object falling from the sky to hurt that. Not water or hail.
Well, if my roof goes, it's your fault because I got my roof guy through you. So I'm going to blame it on you if it fails in some way. Speaking of England, we have been watching, speaking of England and you playing football, aka soccer, we have been watching Ted Lasso. Have you watched that?
I cannot escape people telling me to watch this show.
Oh, it is so good. We just finished season 1 last night, and I could literally start over again and watch all 10 episodes of season 1 and be very content. And
Okay.
one of the main actors, I forget her name, Waddingham or something like that.
She's Game of Thrones.
She's in the Game of Thrones, right? Yeah, she plays a Septa.
That.
Septa
Yes.
Unella, I believe.
Yes. Yes. Who has a significant role later on. But
Right.
She hasn't been in it yet. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really good. If you could get access to Apple TV, to anyone, not just Simon, anyone listening, if you can get access to Apple TV, I really am enjoying that show.
Well, you're not the first person to tell me, so maybe I should set aside my, I don't know what exactly the right prejudice, shall we say, against this show and give it a try.
Is the prejudice founded in anything?
It's partly because the character was created for a commercial.
I was going to ask you about that, because at the beginning of every episode it says, based on a character from NBC, and I had no idea who that was. I was going to ask if you knew.
So when NBC got the rights to English soccer, they created this character to make some humorous commercials for, like, Americans watching Premier League soccer.
Yeah.
And that was the character. It was Ted Lasso, played by the same guy.
Oh, they made a whole show out of those.
Exactly, which is why I'm a little bit prejudiced against it, because I'm just like, he's like a marketing tool, you know.
Right.
But I mean, I guess it's good.
The writing, the acting is fantastic.
What is he called? What's his name?
Jason Sudeikis.
Jason Sudeikis. He said that he wasn't interested when he first got the suggestion, when his agent mentioned it to him. But he said when he read the script, he was like, "Oh, I'm in." You know, so
you can tell Apple or whoever produced it did not skimp on acting and screenwriting. It's really good. So I recommend it.
All right. Well, let's get down to business. How did we leave Catelyn Stark? Last time we saw Cat, she was beseeching Renly to aid Robb Stark. She was despairing at the youth and impetuosity of Renly's advisors. Their lust for war and glory was palpable. And with Renly, she learned that... And with Renly, she learned that Stannis Baratheon was besieging not King's Landing, but the Baratheon home of Storm's End. Why don't we give them the summary of this one?
All right. Well, Cat and Hal Molan are first to arrive at the spot chosen for the meeting of the two rival Baratheon kings. She knows this won't be easy and longs to be back in Riverrun with her dying father, or even Winterfell with, her kids. Although she can't see the sea, she can smell the salt in the air. The giant fortress of Storm's End is visible, though, and Stannis' army looks tiny compared to its might.
Stannis arrives after Hal Molan, true to form, announces that it would be Stannis riding towards them.
He also mentioned that they were the first to arrive when they were the first to arrive.
he had two great moments, Hal Molan, stater of the obvious. Stannis arrives with Melisandre as his standard bearer. The Baratheon crowned stag is much diminished on his new sigil. It's within a red heart, which in turn is within a sunburst of flames. Stannis expresses surprise at Kat's presence and condolences for her loss, but he adds that Ned was no friend of his. He lists his grievances, but promises that she'll have justice when he takes the Iron Throne. She wonders to him why he's here and not at King's Landing.
Well, he points out, and not unreasonably, that he needs the lords that currently march with Renly. He asks if Robb is siding with Renly, and Cat says that Robb is king in the north by the will of his people, but he holds out the hand of friendship to all. Stannis replies that kings have only subjects and enemies, no friends. Renly arrives at this point, with Brienne as his standard bearer. He comments on Stannis' new colors and observes that will make the battle a little less confusing. Cat pleads that there be no battle. She lists the Lannisters' strength and beseeches them to come to terms.
Each demands the bent knee of the other to no avail. Terms are offered, insults are traded. Brienne has to intervene. Stannis sheathes his sword but tells Renly that he has until dawn to pledge fealty or be destroyed. Renly lists the families that are with him. It's a feat of memory, if nothing else, because there's an awful lot.
It goes on for a while.
Yeah. Stannis rides off. Melisandre parts with the words, "Look to your sins, Lord Renly." Cat rides back with Renly.
Cat talks to Renly about the news of Joffrey. This does make Stannis the rightful king. Only while he lives, Renly observes. he goes on to refute hereditary law. He rattles off a long list of his glowing attributes, and then Cat throws in humility, just for grins. But Renly's good-natured and laughs, admitting that even kings must have some flaws. Cat's failed. The Baratheons will fight, and Robb will face the Lannisters alone.
Mathis Rowan advises Renly to leave Stannis to his futile siege, but other advisors argue that he must be dealt with. Renly's advisors are all geared up for battle. Nobody speaks of cool heads, they just vie for the more glorious position on the field of battle. Cat truly despairs and asks for permission to return to River Run. Renly denies her temporarily. He wants her to witness the battle so that Robb will know what happens to rebels.
Cat goes to a nearby sept to pray. She's accompanied by Robar Royce, one of Renly's Rainbow Guard. He explains why he, being from the Vale, is in Renly's army. As a second son, you've got to find your own glory, he says. Back at her own camp, her men ask if they fight or flee, and she answers, "We pray."
Yeah.
So it's weird, me ending the
it was when I was doing it. I mean, I like to do that sort of like back and forth cadence,
right,
but it just didn't fit this time, so I just let you end it. Yeah. So sadly, this went pretty much how we expected. Both of them are too stubborn to bend, but both of them are so brittle as well. You know, I mean, it's the problem with inflexibility. It can often mean that you snap instead of bending.
Right? Yes. Yeah. Exactly. And this is what Tyrion predicted would happen when Cersei said, "Well, what if the Baratheon brothers patch things up?" When he told her of them fighting each other instead of coming to King's Landing, and he said, "They're too much alike and too different. There's no way they're going to patch things up." And pretty much was spot on here.
Yeah, I will say one of my principal joys in reading the Game of Thrones books, the Song of Ice and Fire books, is when two characters who you've learned about and know come together for the first time. Because the whole canopy of this is so huge. You know, the tapestry is so enormous that that you can spend whole books where two characters both of whom you know well but have never met, just keep on orbiting away from each other, and then finally when they come together, this is actually a minor one compared to some of the ones that are still to come. But
sure, yeah,
Renly and Stannis coming together was long foretold. You know, felt like it had to come. So it was always going to be consequential.
Right, absolutely, especially when they both claim to be the king.
Right. Primarily for that reason. Yes.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I do love a good reunion. It's always fun when you get a reunion like this. Now, of course, it's only because Stannis, like, they were together and then, in King's Landing, and then Stannis left to go to Dragonstone, and they haven't been together since. So it hasn't been that long, but it's been the length of our story that they haven't seen each other. So
right, which is what, like probably a year or so now.
Yeah, he's very vague about it, but I think it's nearing year and a half-ish type point. Okay, would be my guess. There's been birthdays coming and going. Bran's 9 now, Arya's 10 now, so. Yeah, I would say a year and a half. Yeah.
It's an interesting coincidence that both of them have female standard bearers, but Brienne is fully armoured, and she's so huge that it probably went unnoticed by Stannis that she was female, in fact.
I'm sure it did, yes. She's pretty enormous, and she was clad in complete armour, so I'm sure he had no idea that there was a Brienne back behind that armour. But speaking of the standard bearers, Stannis changed his sigil. And, it's a bit of a gamble because it makes him look less like Robert's heir, Like, he's no longer got the Baratheon sigil. He's now given that basically uncontested to his brother. Yeah. And his claim to the throne is that he is the heir to Robert Baratheon. He's the elder statesman Baratheon, and that makes him king. And then he goes and changes his symbol. So
I'm going to throw a question at you that isn't in the notes, so good luck.
Okay.
The Baratheon symbol is the crowned stag. was that sigil adapted when Robert became king to add the crown?
No, it always had the crown.
It's always had the crown.
Yeah, I'll actually explain the history of the Baratheon sigil in the background info.
Oh, see how I skipped over the background info when I was practicing this. Yeah, I mean, Stannis is his own man. I mean, that's for sure. But I do take your point. I mean, you are denying your own heritage in some ways, which then opens the door to Renly saying, well, ta-da,
right,
I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also surprising because in Davos 1, he told Davos that he didn't believe in gods and that he only planned to use Melisandre, the fear and unfamiliar nature of Melisandre to his advantage. And here he seems to be embracing R'hllor a lot more than he was in that particular chapter.
Well, her whole drinking poison with barely a blink of the eye has perhaps raised her in his estimation a little bit.
Well, yeah, that was in the prologue, though. So I think he went from totally uninterested at all in this R'hllor thing, that was his wife Selyse's deal, to, I might be able to use this to my advantage in some ways.
Yeah.
And now here he seems like the Patchface insult, when Renly accuses Patchface of being Shireen's father instead of Stannis, he draws a sword that's gleaming red and yellow and white and shimmers, the air shimmers with heat, and he refers to it as Lightbringer, which is a major improvement from what we saw in Davos 1 when they were out burning those statues, and he basically had his oven mitt and a sword that was literally lit on fire. Yes. So this sword, I don't know where this sword came from, but it's a significant improvement over the first iteration of it.
I've got visions of the whole scabbard have been sort of left in coals overnight, right. and as he rides, it's hitting his legs like ow, ow, ow.
Yeah, was it burning in the scabbard? He pulled it out, but he calls it Lightbringer, which is known as the Red Sword of Heroes. So he just doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would pretend that his sword was something that he knows it isn't. Doesn't feel like in his nature. So I don't know. But yeah, it just felt like in Davos 1 he was pretty much just like tolerating the whole sword and statue burning and not really buying into it. And something seems to have changed at least a bit since then. Yeah.
So Stannis tries some small talk with Cat, and he's really not very good at it.
No, he's terrible.
Yeah, he offers condolences, which is a nice thing to do.
Yes.
But then can't help himself by saying that he was no friend of his. But then the grievances that he lists are so minor
and have nothing to do with Ned.
And they have nothing to do with Ned. Like Ned came and relieved him in the Siege of Storm's End at the end of Robert's rebellion. Okay, right. which is actually a good thing. That's that. He was eating shoe leather at the time, and right. He got a meal. But he said, but that was just Robert's orders. That's the only reason he did that. I'm like, he did it. I mean,
right. Regardless, he did it.
Yeah. But then he flips that around because he said, and then he took my job because I should have been hand of the king. And Ned took it. But it's like, but that's because Robert offered it to Ned. Ned didn't want it.
Right. Ned didn't, petition to become hand of the king.
Right.
I'm sure he would have wanted nothing more than to give it to Stannis. He didn't want to go. Cat's the one who talked him into going.
So his complaints are kind of like, the things he did for me were only because Robert ordered him, and the thing he did against me was not because Robert ordered him. That was purely him. I'm like, that's just, you don't have to say these things, and what you're saying is petty and vindictive anyway.
Yeah, when he made this little conversation here, it makes you see why he has trouble garnering support, and why Renly has such a better time of getting support behind him, because he comes off as prickly and rigid and seems to ruminate over grievances and slights regardless of how big they are or how long ago they were.
And the thing is, I would imagine that given that he's known to be unforgiving, like the Red Wines and the Tyrells, he's got a beef with them, is it? Is it Red Wines and Tyrells?
Well, those are the ones that besieged the castle. Yeah.
Besieged Storm's End. That I can understand. I mean, they literally tried to starve you to death and you only just survived it. That right. I can understand having a beef with them. But what Ned did is nothing. I mean, you really can't have any friends if you're going to shun people for that.
That's a good point, yeah.
You once breathed some oxygen that I thought was mine.
That was my oxygen. Yeah, he says that Ned was no friend of his, but if he knew the length that Ned went to try and secure the Iron Throne for him, he might feel differently about Ned.
Ned is dead trying to put Stannis on the throne.
Yes, yeah. It's
of
really...
course, to be fair to Stannis, he doesn't know that. He doesn't know that that's the reason.
Yeah, he doesn't.
He never heard from Ned what Ned was trying to get the message to him. So
exactly.
That's unfortunate.
The letter was supposed to go with Fat Tom and the girls when they went back to Winterfell, but then Fat Tom was with Ned when he was taken captive and Fat Tom was killed, so the letter never got there. But Ned did have Pycelle send Stannis a letter earlier urging him to come back to King's Landing, and either Pycelle never sent it or Stannis ignored it. But
Stannis received it and went, "Oh, typical Ned, bossing me around."
That's what he did. Yeah.
I'm never going to forgive him.
And he offers justice for Ned, despite the fact that he was no friend of his. And Kat says she prefers just having her girls back. And she says this line. She says that Cersei still holds my Sansa. And of Arya, there's been no word since Robert's death. I feel like this is news to us. Because from all we've heard on both sides, I felt like both sides believed that the Starks thought the Lannisters had both girls.
Let me reserve my response to that particular comment until we get to pedantry.
Okay.
Because you have hit the nail on the head, sir. Yes. So Stannis says that the Iron Throne is his by right, and all those who deny him are his enemy. That's kind of his MO.
Yep.
And Renly tells him nobody wants you for their king, which that is a problem.
It is. It's this whole chapter. I really felt for Stannis. I know he comes off as a prickly jerk, but Renly was just such a petulant little child in this whole
little brothers
conversation.
Little brothers always are to elder brothers.
Yes, maybe it's because I have an older brother too, but I have little brothers, and the whole time I was like, just arrogant, petulant little brat. But yeah, so when he says that, Kat snaps, and she lays out the situation that about the Lannisters' forces. She says Tywin's got 20,000 sitting in Harrenhal, and that the remnants of Jaime's army from the Battle of the Camps that had besieged Riverrun has regrouped at the Golden Tooth, and now there's a new army coming together in Lannisport. And I think that's news to us, that the veterans of the Battle of the Camps that didn't die are gathering at the Golden Tooth. I don't think we'd heard that news before, had we?
Well, when you ask a question like that and I haven't done my research, then we're relying on my memory. But didn't we have quite a long discussion about Kat's journey south and how she was avoiding the region of the Golden Tooth? Because of that. No, not necessarily because of that, but that's possibly why. So maybe...
Right. Yeah, that could be.
This is just expanding on something that was already being hinted at, that had become dangerous to Starks because that's where Jaime's forces were retreating to.
Yeah, that could be. That makes sense. Of course, Theon told us in his first chapter when he was talking to his father that Robb is headed in that direction. Robb was planning on heading west through the Golden Tooth to get to Lannisport. So that could be problematic if there's a force laying there. But it seems like Kat already knows about it. So if Kat knows about it, then chances are Robb probably knows about it too.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
Yeah. And then Renly says something fairly stupid, that he said the Lannisters can await his pleasure, but that's not how you use your forces when your opponents are on the ropes, which they slightly are at this moment. They are dispersed, disorganized, and bloodied from various battles. Now's the time to put your foot on their throat, you know?
Yes. Yeah, basically what I came away thinking from this conversation is that Renly thinks his strength is invincible, the strength of his 100,000 person army, and that therefore he has no need for allies and no care about timing of when he attacks, because whenever he does, he'll just destroy his enemy. That does not sound like the mind of a seasoned military commander.
Yeah, but he's not completely blind to the allies, because he's been, marching through the south, picking them up as he went, and he's managed to build this huge army.
Yes, I guess I'm thinking the major allies, the other kings.
But yeah, that is his problem though now, because he clearly has the largest force in Westeros, so he can do this by himself. And then it's like, well, do you want to fight Robb Stark for the North, or do you want to just let him be the king of the North?
Right? Yeah.
It's cold up there. You don't need it.
You don't
live without it.
You don't need the taxes. You've got the reach. The reach
exactly.
You've got the reach in the West. They're rich enough.
So one thing I thought during this chapter was how there's so much information available to everybody in this book, and it is sometimes sort of startling when you realize who doesn't know certain things.
Right.
So when Stannis we actually kind of skipped over this in the recap, but Stannis makes the accusation about Joffrey's parentage, right, in the conversation with Renly. He says, I'm the true king because Joffrey is the child of incest with Jaime Lannister and Cersei. And Kat did not know this. This was the first time she'd heard this.
Right.
Which is really, she must be the last person in Westeros.
She might be.
She's been on the road this whole time, she's just missed it.
Well, the last she saw Ned, they were discussing the dagger, which eventually led to Tyrion's arrest. There was no talk. He hadn't gotten to the conclusion of his hunt for Jon Arryn's killer and discovered about the incest. So she didn't get that opportunity. And when they first got to Riverrun and they named Robb king in the north, he said, well, Joffrey is the true heir to Robert Baratheon, so we are traitors, but I am still going to kill him.
Right.
So... yeah. But we had also discussed a few times about what Renly knew and why he fled King's Landing when he did at Robert's death, and we wondered if maybe it was because he knew about the incest, but it certainly seems like he didn't, because he here kind of mocks it. What he says, he was with Lord Rendell Tarley when he got his letter from Stannis announcing this whole incest thing, and he indicates that's how he found out about this. So it seems like maybe he and Barristan Selmy must have been the only members of the small council who didn't know, because every other member of the small council has mentioned that they did know.
Yeah, which is interesting then, because now we get a little bit of the sort of like the piecing together of the timeline of all this. So, as you just mentioned, Stannis and Renly were together in King's Landing for quite a long period of time.
Right.
A year to 18 months ago. Stannis was there telling Jon Arryn of his suspicion of Joffrey's parentage, but he never confided in Renly.
Good point.
At least what you're saying here makes you think he never confided in Renly.
Sure does, yeah.
Even though Renly would have been fascinated to learn that news and actually potentially an ally for Stannis' later claim to the throne.
Right.
Had he known up front. But now, because Stannis didn't share it with Renly is now in the position which he adopts of saying, well, isn't this self-serving?
Right. Isn't that convenient?
All of a sudden...
all of a sudden, you're the heir.
Exactly. When you're third in line to the throne, you suddenly cast aspersions on the first two's claim.
Yeah, it's not great timing. It did not work out well for Stannis.
Which, of course, had he confided in Renly, Renly wouldn't be able to say this.
Makes you wonder why he didn't. He must not have trusted him at some level.
Right. I mean, like, did he think Renly would go to the Lannisters with that? Is that how untrustworthy Renly is?
Right. Well, we see now that Renly has no honor to... has no feelings of honor for his family, to especially to his older brother. Well, very little. He's willing to kill him, even though at some point in this chapter he admits that he very well might be the heir if that story is true.
Yeah.
He said he's still like, and he's the heir until he's dead, and then I'm the heir. So
yes. Yeah, but I'm not. I think that's a little bit unfair on Renly because he actually is raising a very good point. If in all honesty, Stannis is the heir, and then Renly is next in line, the fact that he perceives himself not unfairly to be built for kingdom far more than his older brother, then saying, well, let's just ignore the hereditary laws in this case and let's make me the king, isn't actually that dishonourable. It's a little bit treasonous to your brother, but apart from that...
you can certainly see why it rankles Stannis, because it is absolutely direct. I guess you're right. It is the fairly standard law in Westeros, is the hereditary inheritance.
Right, but coming back to the question that Varys posed to Tyrion about power. What is power? Right, sure, the hereditary laws, but if the younger brother ups and kills the older brother, well, the throne is his,
Yeah, I guess if you're all right with fratricide, as long as he's all right with...
Stannis makes that a lot easier than it would be for most people. That's for sure. But so the other part of that's interesting to me is that Cat asks Stannis why he kept this news to himself. And he makes the very interesting point that he thought that he wanted Robert to know it. He wanted Robert to learn this news. But he didn't think hearing it from himself, from Stannis, would be the right vessel for it. Which does show a little bit of sort of self-awareness of Stannis, which he has not exhibited very much of in our dealings with him.
It's a well thought out idea. Absolutely.
Yeah, he thought if John Arryn was the messenger, then Robert would take it a lot better. I mean, obviously he'd be mad about it, but he wouldn't doubt the messenger. He would believe the message, hearing it from John, who he saw as a father,
Yeah, it makes sense. Stannis comes to him and says this. He could certainly come off as self-serving because that makes him the heir. Right. So you get John Arryn, who... But
not just that, but also because Stannis doesn't like Robert very much. And nothing a younger brother would like to do more than tell an older brother, hey, your kids aren't yours,
Yeah, unfortunately the whole thing leaves him with no proof now.
Right, and what's interesting then, I think, is that John Arryn doesn't rush to Robert with the news. Instead, he does his own investigation to try and get to the bottom of it, because he's okay. I hear this suspicion, but the kid's blonde, big deal. But until he sort of like interviews Gendry and
Baby Barra and Baby Barra's mom,
right, and then reads the book of lineages, he doesn't take Stannis' word, but then he begins to believe, and then he gets murdered. Which is why Stannis obviously concludes that Cersei murdered Jon. But back we come to that same question of why did she not admit to this when she was admitting to far worse crimes?
Yep. It certainly pokes a lot of holes in her involvement.
Yeah. But the thing is, maybe it was Jaime. Maybe Jaime's the one who discovered it. It's just as bad news for Jaime as it is for Cersei.
Right.
So she maybe is innocent of it. I mean, you just feel like she's more calculating, and perhaps there's a sort of sexism here. You assume the woman did the poisoning, whereas Jaime might have chopped his head off or something,
Right. Yes. That is something that Tyrion has mentioned several times about Jaime, is his reaction to things is to just, slash.
Swift and yes.
But if you remember way back to Bran 2 in a Game of Thrones, before when Bran was overhearing them, Cersei and Jaime talking at the top of that tower, they were mentioning Lysa Arryn's accusations. So it's possible that they were both aware of what was going on. So it could have been, you're right, Jaime could be a suspect that hasn't been considered yet.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
That's right, though. But even then they were talking about it in a way that didn't make them sound very guilty. Not directly, anyway.
Right,
possibly,
it was something like they were
indirectly.
just talking about, well, she has accusations and that's all.
Yeah.
Right, I think possibly something like that.
But Pycelle confessed to letting Arryn die, right?
Yes, right.
Right.
But
But he also said he wasn't ordered to do that. He just did that because he knew that's what Cersei would want.
Yes, that's
Right.
exactly right. He said she did not have a part in it. He could see from her face, by looking at her, that she needed Jon Arryn to die without any spoken words between the two of them. Now, he blamed the poisoning on Hugh of the Vale, but no one has mentioned who ordered Hugh of the Vale to kill
Right.
Jon Arryn.
But he was very quickly knighted thereafter. So
Yes,
it was
and
someone
then quickly
with
killed
influence.
after that.
And then quickly killed by Gregor again. Right, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, this does explain why Jon Arryn and Stannis were participating in that investigation together, because Ned wondered, Jon Arryn and Stannis? Why are those two going into a brothel together? And why is Jon Arryn considering fostering Robert Arryn with Stannis on Dragonstone of all places?
Right.
Now we could see some of these pieces falling together here.
Yeah. So back to the meeting. I noticed that Stannis gets in another slur on Renly's hetero credentials.
Right.
Renly says that Marjorie Tyrell was a maiden when he married her, and Stannis retorts that she's likely to stay that way in Renly's bed. Ooh,
Yeah.
That's a burn.
Yeah, it certainly came off that way, reading it, that that's what he was implying. That
Right. What else? What else could he mean? You know?
Right. Yeah.
But then Renly comes back with his own slurs that you've already mentioned about Patchface being the father of Shireen. You know, your wife's so
Right.
ugly, you get your simple-minded jester to do the deed with her. And then Stannis comes back with, well, your mama... Wait a minute, that's my mama too.
Yeah, news sure does spread quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think think this has been the gossip of the realm, these two particular stories.
I guess. I'm wondering if there's any way that Stannis could know what Renly was talking about regarding Patchface.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking maybe sailors coming out of King's Landing, and you wouldn't go to Dragonstone unless you were like joining the Stannis forces, you know? Like,
right,
you wouldn't just randomly stop in at Dragonstone right now, anyway.
I wonder if it was a rumor before Littlefinger made it up. I wonder if Littlefinger didn't just conjure it, but if it was something that had been said before as like a joke. Yeah. Something that maybe Stannis had heard previously.
Sure, that could be. You know, she's got the grayscale, and Patchface has the tattoos on his face, hence the name. One thing I wanted to say quickly about the Jon Arryn Stannis investigation thing is that back in the first Davos chapter, Davos said the same thing to Stannis, that you have no proof of the incest, and Stannis said there's proof of sorts at Storm's End, referring to his nephew Edric Storm, who was fathered on Stannis' wedding night by Robert Baratheon, and he says that Edric looks exactly like Robert, and then he said something like, people see him, and then they see these Baratheon kids, kids in quotations, Cersei's kids, and they'll start to wonder.
Baratheon in quotations.
Yes.
They are kids.
They are kids. It's the Baratheon part that's a quotation mark. But then they're wondering, but how do we get people to see him when he's stuck in Storm's End? Well, maybe you siege the place until they send the kid out. So
maybe he's not trying to actually get in there he's like, if you give me Edric, I'll move along. Interesting.
Yes. He withholds that here when he said when Renly says, "Do you have any proof at all?" He could have said, "Have you seen your nephew Edric? Does he look anything like the other Baratheons in King's Landing?" But he doesn't. Right. He doesn't say anything about him or why he might be at Storm's End.
Well, because he doesn't feel the need to try and help Renly with Renly's claim. You know, he's working on his own claim. Yeah.
Yes.
So Renly offers to Stannis Storm's End. He can keep Storm's End and be the Baratheon Lord, but Renly's going to be king. He also offers him a peach. He doesn't put any conditions on the peach. But his offer of the peach is basically a death threat, because he's like, "Oh, this peach is so good. You want to try it?" And Stannis is like, "No." And he's like, "Well, a man should never really say no to a peach, because you never know when it'll be his last one, you know?" So
yeah, there's a whole section of the internet dedicated to Renly's peach.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like some folks believe
not his bottom, the peach that he was offering.
The peach, yes. Okay. The peach he's eating in this chapter.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Some suggest that maybe, it's Renly, showing Renly being able to enjoy life and while Stannis can't. Or Stannis' inability to relate to people, and which is why Renly gets support so much more easily. However, George Martin had something to say about Renly's peach. I'm going to read his quote to you.
Please.
He says, "The peach represents, its pleasure. It's tasting the juices of life. Stannis is a very martial man concerned with his duty. And with that peach, Renly says, smell the roses. Because Stannis is always concerned with his duty and honor and what he should be doing, and he never really stops to taste the fruit. Renly wants him to taste the fruit, but it's lost. I wish," and then he goes on to say, "I wish that scene had been included in the TV series, because for me, that peach was important, but it wasn't possible."
Funnily enough, actually, now I know that I'm wrong, I'll carry on anyway. I thought it was sort of like, yes, I can definitely see that interpretation, and certainly that's a clear sort of like message being given. But I also thought it was like see, I've got High Garden, where the peaches grow.
Yes, right.
They're on Team Renly.
Enjoy your codfish. I've got peaches.
Yeah, exactly. Very interesting. Thanks. So Stannis' counteroffer is actually more generous. It doesn't include peaches, but it is that Renly can have Storm's End. So they're both offering Storm's End to the other one. But Renly can also keep his seat on the small council, which again I find interesting, given that he didn't tell him about what he suspected and knew when he was in King's Landing with it. If you trust him enough to be an advisor to you as king, then why didn't you trust him a year ago when he could have been a useful ally in the plot you were hatching?
Absolutely. It's a very curious situation.
The extra thing that Stannis is offering is that he would name Renly his heir until Patchface delivers. I'm sorry, not Patchface. Until Stannis fathers a son. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a pretty fair offer, especially for how petulant this younger brother is being, throwing all these insults and disrespect his way. And let me just remind you that Robert and Stannis were only like a couple years apart. But Stannis is like 13 years or so older than Renly. This is a significantly younger brother. And maybe he's too young to get how disrespectful and petulant he is coming across here. But it continued to rankle me the whole chapter.
Yeah. So, you definitely became Team Stannis reading this, didn't you? I see this.
I did, yes.
Yeah. So Renly paints a pretty grim picture of things for Stannis. He does list all the houses that are supporting him, and literally neither in the summary nor now do we have time to go through them all. Right. It was a huge list.
It's like a page long.
It was, yeah. Stannis, of course, is undeterred.
He started this chapter by saying, "I don't have the men to contest for the Iron Throne."
He only told Cat that. He didn't tell Renly that.
That was before Renly showed up. So how does he plan to, as he says, destroy Renly when he has just such a significant... it's like 50,000 to 5,000. I mean, it is I don't know. We never get an exact count because Renly only brought his mounted force, not the foot. So we don't get an exact count, but it has to be Renly. He might just be disparaging Stannis again here, but he says, what, you've got 400 mounted and about 5,000 total. So I don't know what his plan is here, but I wonder if Melisandre maybe factors into it.
Well, I mean, that's the one thing that you get from this, is that Stannis and Melisandre leave the meeting not bothered. They're not afraid. They're not deterred.
Right.
And it's like, how could you not be? What is it that you've got plotting that makes you have any kind of confidence in what's to come? Yeah. And to me, it feels like it must be an assassination attempt. Because that's the only thing that could get you out of this mess. Because if Renly were to be assassinated, then everything falls into place for Stannis. Even if it's Stannis. Even if Stannis sneaks in there in the middle of the night and slits his throat for all to see, they're all going to swear fealty to him because he's now the only Baratheon.
Yeah. Except for the ones in King's Landing.
Well, okay, the only true Baratheon.
Right, yes. Now, way back in the prologue, Selyse told Stannis that Melisandre looked into the fire, which is what the red priests and priestesses do. That's how they see the futures, through the fire, and she saw Renly dead. But, of course, she also said the Florents were going to support Stannis, and the Florents are one of the names that Renly mentions is on his side, so...
For now.
Right, yes, for now.
If Melisandre's previous prophecy comes true of Renly dead, then her secondary prophecy of the Florents supporting Stannis will also come true immediately afterwards.
Very good point. Very good point.
Yeah. But that's the thing. That's the thing about prophecies, though. I've said this before several times. This goes all the way back to sort of Macbeth. Prophecies gain their own momentum. The prophecy comes true because the prophecy was made.
Oh yeah.
Melisandre has said, "Oh, I saw Renly dead," and now she feels a little bit of responsibility to make sure that happens. Otherwise, her prophecies aren't so good.
Right? Yeah. I get it, yeah. But back to your other point about Renly having such an overwhelming force is that he doesn't even question what Stannis might have up his sleeve.
Right.
He just mentioned, he just laid out this situation of how so incredibly heavily he outnumbers Stannis, but Stannis didn't cower or anything. He just like, all right, well, you've got till tomorrow or I will destroy you. You'd think if he were a true military leader, he would go back to his men and say, okay, what am I missing here? What could he possibly have up his sleeve?
Right. Yeah. And I want to read out what you put in the notes here. Stannis doesn't seem like a guy to boast about victory if he's unsure about it, but I would say Stannis has never been unsure of anything. Certainty is his trump card, Good point. So Catelyn compares in her mind, she doesn't say this to anyone, she thinks that Renly is a lot like Robert, but that Robert had Ned to temper him. And she doesn't say this, but I would like to interject. He also had Jon Arryn to temper him. These were the cool heads that kept Robert's worst instincts at bay. Right. And Renly doesn't have these people. None of his advisors are giving him any kind of, the strategically, the more tactically poor thing that he did in this chapter was to ride ahead of his troops to this meeting, leaving behind his foot soldiers and his food and all that kind of thing. So he's put himself in a far more vulnerable position than he needs to be because he's hot-headed. And if Ned had been there, he would have said, no, wait, Stannis is besieging Storm's End. He's not going to win that in a couple of days. Let's take our time and get there en masse. Yeah,
they mentioned that the walls of Storm's End are 40 feet thick on the narrowest part and like 100 feet high. He's got like 5,000 men. So there was no need to rush here. They're just
even with time. Good tools, it's going to take a while, yeah.
Right. Yeah. But Cat actually, there's actually a couple more instances where Renly kind of compares to Stannis. You remember, Renly freely admits to Stannis, okay, yeah, you've got the better claim, but I have the bigger army, which is the same thing he told Cat last chapter when he said, my brother Robert, they called him a usurper. He won the throne without a claim by killing Rhaegar with his warhammer. This, referring to his vast army, is my warhammer. Right. So I'm going to take the throne even though I don't have a claim with this warhammer. But then he says, he compares himself to Robert when Stannis says, you have no claim. I'm the king. You'll be a traitor, a usurper. And he says, Robert was called a usurper and he got over it. So I'll do the same.
Yeah.
But so then they get back to, they break up and they go their separate ways, and they get, Kat goes with Renly because that's where her people are in Renly's camp. And he gets in with his higher lords and explains, that Stannis isn't going to bend, that, that it looks like it's heading toward war. And Matthias Rowan, I feel like he kind of hits the nail on the head. He says there's no need for battle. Stannis' meager force can't affect Storm's End. I mean, we just laid out why they can't affect Storm's End. So just leave them be and go take King's Landing, which makes perfect sense. It would have been better given before leaving Bitterbridge, because now Renly's argument is he's afraid to lose face if he turns around and leaves.
Whereas if he just kept going to King's Landing, he's not backed down from anything with Stannis. He's just fighting his enemies in the sequence of his choosing. Yeah.
Yes. He takes that huge army to King's Landing and takes the throne. Then what's Stannis going to do?
Right. He can, after he's failed to besiege Storm's End, he can come and fail to besiege King's Landing.
Exactly. He already doesn't have the men to besiege King's Landing with just the Gold Cloaks defending it, let alone 100,000 strong army. So I think I think Matthias Rowan is exactly right here.
Yeah. But I think the other thing is, I think most of the people in this room are keen to tell Renly what Renly wants to hear.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And Randyll Tarly is not wrong to say that Stannis is a danger to you. While you were fighting the Lannisters, your army will be shrinking. Stannis' army could be growing, but I'm not sure exactly where that's coming from.
That's what I want to know too. Yeah. How is his army going to grow while besieging Storm's End?
He's going to pull like a Saruman, sort of like...
Yes.
Pull him out of the ground,
Even if Renly takes casualties at King's Landing, he could lose like 95% of his army and still outnumber Stannis' army. Unless, I know that Stannis sent some people out. He sent Davos out and Davos' sons out to try and gain some support, but he'd have to gain so much support in such a short time that I just don't see how that's possible.
Yeah. So basically the other lords in there all agree with Tarly. They are Knights of Summer. They want to be in this with Renly for glory and poetry, songs in the future.
That's what they're looking for. They're looking for the glory.
So when all that comes to an end, sort of like they prepare for the evening before the battle, Brienne, she is heterosexual. She has eyes only for King Renly, and she volunteers to help him dress for battle, which makes all of the guys laugh because they are school children, basically.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, true.
And Kat feels sorry for her because she realized last chapter that just in quick first meeting of Brienne that she was in love with Renly, but she sees it here again and thinks, she's in love with him. She'll be his squire just to touch him.
Yeah. And while Renly does agree to that, he doesn't exactly banish the rumours of his own preferences when he sends everyone away from potentially his last night on Earth, except the dashing Solaris Tyrell, the Knight of Pansies, if you'll remember. And let's hope they're not both too tired from a night of praying to fight in the morning.
Yeah, there's that was not lost on me either. Yeah. That's.
But honestly, I think between Stannis and Renly, there is one good king here. Stannis
is... Mash up!
Exactly. The Stannis' drive, ferocity, his strength, his focus, but softened by Renly's touch, popularity, charm. They should rule side by side and cancel each other's worst attributes out.
Exactly. If they could come up with a way of how to do that, they would have a perfect king.
Yep. All right, you got some background for me that I haven't read?
I do, in fact. Now you can read along. So at the beginning of this chapter, while, as Hal Mullen points out, Cat and Hal are first to arrive at the meeting spot, she's ruminating over the origins of Storm's End, and I'll just kind of quickly recap what she thinks about here because it ties in. Storm's End having been built by Durin Godsgrief, not once, but 7 times, because, you see, he fell in love with and married the goddess Elenai, and she was the daughter of the sea god and the goddess of the wind, and because of their disapproval of the marriage, the godly in-laws sent a storm to blow down and smash the first iteration of Storm's End, killing most of the wedding party to boot. Durin, being a rather stubborn guy, continued to rebuild the castle time and time again, only to have the in-laws whip up a storm once more and crush the newly built castle each time. But on the 7th time, the castle finally held up to the storms, possibly due to some construction advice from a young Bran the Builder, or maybe some Children of the Forest intervention, as have been rumored in the songs. But only then, when they finally got their castle to withstand the storms, could Durin and Elenai live their lives together in marital bliss. That was the beginning of House Durrandon and the rise of the first Storm King. Now, as I mentioned in previous background from previous episodes, the Durrandons extended their realm all the way up into the Riverlands. However, over the centuries, their domain continued to shrink until finally the Ironborn Harwin Hoare, grandfather to Harwin the Hare in the Black, with the help of the River Lords, drove the Durrandons out of the Riverlands. And then, as I just mentioned in Tyrion 7 a couple episodes ago, the male line of the House Durrandon came to an end at the hands of Orys Baratheon, when Aegon's Hand of the King killed Argilac the Arrogant, the last Storm King, and married his daughter Argella. Now, the Durrandon sigil was a black-crowned stag on a gold field, and their words were, "Ours is the fury." And if both of those sound familiar, it's because they are also the sigil and words of House Baratheon. Orys kept both words and sigil after marrying Argella to honor his new wife's house.
Answering my question from earlier, thank you.
Yes.
That's good stuff, thanks. So, comparison with the television show is very much captured. Certainly the scene on the hilltop where they meet one another. Slightly larger contingents, there's like 10 people present, but
no Peach.
No Peach. And no Brienne. I didn't see Brienne anyway, if she was there, but then again, she was in full armor, maybe I wouldn't have noticed. Renly comments on Melisandre's beauty. I see why you found religion, brother. Melisandre has a lot more lines in the meeting than she does in the book as well.
Okay.
And I think the TV show recognised that they picked a winner in Carice Van Houten by this point, so they wanted to beef up her contributions.
She was great.
Yeah, she was good. Pedantry Corner, so coming back, circling back, my pedantry was exactly what you mentioned before. When Cat says to Stannis, "Cersei still holds my daughter, and of Arya there's been no word since the day of Robert's death." Well, that feels like she suspects the Lannisters don't have her, but we've not heard anyone voice that before. The only reason that she might have any reason to doubt that they have Arya is because Sansa never mentioned Arya in her letter. But there was a lot going on. Be easy to forget, you know.
P.S. Arya's doing great.
Arya says hi.
But you're right, though. I guess if you look at it from that standpoint, there's been no actual word of Arya. Yeah. Because she got a letter from Sansa. She's got nothing from Arya.
She is literally telling the truth, but she is hinting at a suspicion, which I don't know where that really comes from. Because, well, I guess not. I guess the point is, lots of people were killed in what happened in King's Landing the day of Robert's death. So maybe Arya was killed. Not that Arya's in the wind, as we know she is, but that she got killed somehow. Yeah. Okay, so tiny pedantry, not complete.
Yeah, but you're right. The way she says it certainly makes it sound like she fears for Arya's existence.
Right.
Because I don't imagine she figures Arya is just roaming about the realm as she is.
So news and notes. You've got something here.
News and notes. I wanted to follow up on like I just was saying in the background section. Back in Tyrion 7, when we talked about Orys Baratheon, it was mentioned that Orys was the only true friend of Aegon the Conqueror, and it was also widely accepted rumor that he's actually Aegon the Conqueror's half-brother. And then you, Simon, questioned where the name Baratheon came from. If the bastard son of Aerion Targaryen, where did he get the name Baratheon from? So I did some digging, and there seems to be no concrete answer to this. Conspiracy theories abound on the internet, of course. Some of the popular answers include that it's a Valyrian bastard last name, but most Valyrian last names have a Y in them, which is not... Celtigar is a Valyrian last name, and it doesn't have a Y in it, so, it's not unheard of. Also, possibly a name that he just gave himself. And then one interesting option proposed involves House Bar-Aemon. They're from Sharp Point in the Bight, very close to Dragonstone, so it's possible there was some influence between the two places. And in Hebrew, Bar means son, so maybe Baratheon is like son of Athion or son of Theon. Maybe there was a Theon involved, I don't know.
But I thought you said he was the son of Aerion, right?
Right, yeah, maybe they pretended like... Maybe they didn't let the guy know this is not your son. I don't know. That's just a theory thrown out there that possibly there was some sort of father figure named Theon or Athion or something like that. But, and not for nothing, but House Bar-Aemon was sworn to the Storm Kings prior to Orys dethroning the Durandons. So, I don't know. But one that I kind of liked is some likened Orys to Jane Poole. Jane Poole was the daughter of Vaon Poole, a member of the Stark household, and Sansa's best friend, but not her bastard half-sister. So maybe just because Aegon and Orys were so tight, this rumor just spread that, he must be his half-brother.
Right. He was from a long line of Baratheons.
Right. So there you go. The answer is, I don't know. Nobody seems to know where the name Baratheon came from.
So we have a review from Apple Podcast. Hijcall876 $ampersand. Thought-provoking entertainment. Like I really appreciate the detailed breakdown of A Song of Ice and Fire chapters. The discussions are informative and thought-provoking without feeling stale. Highly recommended listening. I challenge the avid podcast listener to give the podcast a try. Past 1 to 2 episodes, apparently those weren't the best. The early episodes are a little cheesy as Simon and Mackelly fine-tune their style. Their authenticity is endearing, and I enjoy hearing the first 5 to 10 minutes of the podcast detailing day-to-day family life during COVID lockdown. Well, thank you very much. That is on the money, that review. Right
he's not wrong. Yeah. I often wonder how we get any listeners past the first couple episodes because they're so stale and we were so we just didn't get we didn't have our personality out there yet, we were just kind of figuring things out. So I agree. The first 2 can be a little tough to get through, but I'm glad you made it past those first 2.
Yeah. Well, let's draw this one to a conclusion. Otherwise, we're going to lose more of them. So Cersei will be doing backflips if she knew the stupidity of her enemies. They're both so stubborn and unyielding. Renly might be right about the kind of king he'll make, but he better start showing some better judgment now if he's going to ever become king. Yeah.
What Cersei would be doing is dancing with Tyrion.
Possibly even dancing with Tyrion, yeah.
That's what she was doing when she found out, so she might do it again.
Yeah. And Stannis' reputation for not being very likeable is clearly well-founded. He begrudges the man who was asked to be hand of the king when he was overlooked. Shouldn't your beef be with the person who appointed him, not the person who got appointed,
You would think so, yes. He seems like the kind of guy who just likes to gripe about grievances and slights. Yeah. But... yes, I agree with you. You can certainly see from this chapter how he doesn't have a lot of buddies. he's a tough nut to crack, that Stannis Baratheon. But I really struggled with Renly in this chapter. I found him rather detestable. Jovially talking about fratricide. At least Stannis seemed to feel sad about the idea. Renly seemed to have no qualms about adding regicide to the fratricide, if the incest story was true, which of course we know that it is. So, he says to Cat, he's the true king while he lives. And I was like, okay, well, if you're so cool with killing your brother, then why not just play along and help get Stannis onto the throne and then kill him? It'd be a lot easier than this fighting going on here. Just, join forces, get him on the throne, and off him. He said he'd make you his heir, so if you're all right with killing him, then just do it then. It'd be easier.
Yeah, but the part of the problem is once you've gone to all this trouble of amassing 100,000 army and all of these lords, you can't really say, well, you know what? Now I've thought about it some more, I'm going to take a step down and let my brother take over, Yeah,
I guess I mean from the beginning. If he knows that Stannis is his significantly older brother, so if you really couldn't care whether your brother lives or dies, then help him get on the throne and then kill him. It'd be a lot easier than this. I didn't care for Renly's attitude in this chapter, clearly. And Stannis, Crescent, and Donald Noy have all, stated that basically they think of him as a pretender, not a ruler. So, Yeah.
He definitely hasn't done much to give us any indication that he can rule, but apart from his ability to gather followers,
and that's important.
It isn't. Well, it's not that important in the hereditary system, but it's useful. It's useful in a hereditary system that's breaking down, because it allows you to have 100,000 strong army. So,
yes, it is.
Melisandre is kind of sinister.
She doesn't say much in this chapter, but
if I were Renly, I'd be looking to my sins just in case.
Right. She said to look into my sins. Okay, let's go through these. Yeah.
Can you help me? Can you help me, Solaris? Could you remind me of one or two of them, please?
Like I said earlier, Stannis seems to be increasingly embracing R'hllor and Melisandre. He brought Melisandre with him. First of all, it's something we hadn't really thought about. He chose her to come with him to this. Only one person came along with him. So it just it seems like there was a progression of high skepticism in the prologue, using her to scare people, but seeming to really only tolerate her antics in Davos 1, to adopting the sigil of R'hllor, calling his sword Lightbringer, and bringing Melisandre with him at this meeting. So it seems to be a progression going on here.
Yeah. Cat is probably right to despair, but certainly Team Renly think they're going to win the battle swiftly and decisively. And if Renly could remove Stannis with minimal losses, and being Renly, he'd forgive those who fought against him,
Yes, right.
The people who were loyal to Stannis aren't doing anything wrong in Renly's eyes, but once Stannis is dead, he could say, hey, put up your swords, join my team,
Yeah.
The other way around, Stannis might have to execute 100,000 people here.
He just might. One by one.
Yeah. And he goes to the Ned Stark school. He's like, I'm exhausted.
I gotta do it myself. In fact, Renly says to Stannis, probably most of your people are going to come to my side before we even start the battle.
Right.
So, he is expecting them to come to his side at some point.
So if Renly's right and this does go the way he wants, then he really would be in a position to go fight the Lannisters and Robb. Well,
yes.
Not necessarily fight Robb, fight with Robb, perhaps. We'll have to see how that pans out.
Right.
Anyway, as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter at ghostharrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Discord.
And if you would, please go out and leave us a 5-star rate and or a fantastic review. We certainly would appreciate it. And if you leave us a fantastic review, we just might read it on a future episode.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.